It's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you without some dope content to listen to. Happy holiday to you and yours. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy Hanukkah. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year in advance. Thank y'all for rocking out with me. I appreciate it. Continue to like, continue to subscribe, continue to join the membership. Let's do some great things, y'all. Over the last few days, I've had a chance to catch up on some TV, catch up on some Netflix. And I saw that Netflix actually dropped one of the most random sports documentaries that, comes to mind. I'm a John Elway fan. I'm a Denver Broncos fan. But when I saw John Elway had a documentary, I was like, what's happening here? This is something that I would expect from ESPN, but Netflix was not seeing. I didn't have that on my bingo card. When I think about John Elway, I think about the late 90s. I think about those back-to-back Super Bowl runs. I think about the cold weather in Denver. I think back to the big shoulder pads. I think about those times where they didn't protect the quarterback like they do now. I remember the late 90s football where they had Jacked Up on ESPN. I remember NFL Blitz. If you remember NFL Blitz, you were a real one. Because NFL Blitz was that game that you had to have. You had your 2Ks, you had your Madden, you had NFL Game Day if you go back to the original PlayStation. But NFL Blitz was that game. See, y'all don't remember NFL Blitz? NFL Blitz merged WWE with football. Like German suplexes, picking people up, throwing them, bench pressing them. Like NFL Blitz was that game if you were a guy's guy in those late 90s. That's what I think about when I think about the late 90s. That era didn't ask for your attention. It captured your attention. It arrested your attention. So I pressed play on the Netflix documentary, and by the end, I realized this wasn't a football documentary. This was a story about the cost of greatness. By the time John Elway reached his 5th year, I would say, they started calling John Elway the Duke of Denver. Not because he was flashy, not because he talked the loudest, but because when John Elway walked into the room adjusted. Like John Wayne in any of the old westerns. Tall, calm, unbothered. You knew who the story was about. And before a word was said, this Netflix documentary opens up with that comparison. And it stuck with me. John Elway didn't play heroes who were easy. He played men who carried hurt, who stood alone in the dust, while everybody else watched from the porch. And that was John Elway's story. And if you really pay attention, if you really sat there and watched, it's not just a football story. It's a story about endurance. Before the NFL, before Denver, before the orange jerseys, there was Stanford. And if you know football history, you know the call. The band is on the field. It's a moment that lives forever. But what the documentary reframes is this. Elway didn't lose that game because he failed. He did his job. He drove down the field. He put Stanford in a position to win. Chaos happened around him. And that becomes the story of his life. It becomes the theme of his career. From the jump, John Elway was expected to control what couldn't be controlled. And that's pressure. Real pressure. So, we go into the draft. John Elway is drafted by the New York Yankees in baseball. And then, later on, it turns out he's drafted by the Baltimore Colts. Crazy situation happens. A lot of people come out, talk about him. Terry Bradshaw, in particular, said that he's a diva. If he's from California, you want to play on the West Coast, go do your thing. Maybe you don't need to be in football, etc. A lot of criticism. But it turns out Dan Reeves, the Denver Broncos, work out a trade. John Elway goes to Denver. On paper, this is a perfect marriage. Dan Reeves played with the Cowboys, knows how to win, with a young quarterback who just needs to get that extra push. Perfect marriage. But in reality, two strong-willed people pulling in opposite directions. The documentary doesn't sugarcoat this. This wasn't love. This was tolerance. Reeves wanted structure. John Elway needed freedom. But here's the thing. Sometimes greatness doesn't come wrapped in harmony. Sometimes it comes wrapped in friction. Anybody who's ever tried to build something real inside a system that didn't fully fit them knows that feeling. You're successful, but you're uncomfortable. By the 4th year of his career, John Elway reaches the AFC Championship. And then comes the drive. They were down late. They had 98 yards to go with 5 minutes left. In today's time, 5 minutes is more than enough time. But back then, nah, that's not a lot of time. In the today of things, Patrick Mahomes only needed 13 seconds to win a game. But back then, 5 minutes is crucial. They started on the 2-yard line. And my favorite detail that kind of makes you laugh in 2025 is that the kicker is on the sideline. He's warming up, but he doesn't have his shoes on. Well, he has one shoe on. These dudes were kicking with bare feet. Cleveland Memorial. Mind you, this game was played in Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland Memorial Stadium. It's cold, and this dude is kicking with no shoe on. The drive didn't just crown John Elway as a superstar. It crowned him as being Mr. Reliable, Mr. Clutch, Mr. The game is never over until it's over. This is the kind of quarterback where teammates stop panicking because he's in the huddle. I would liken it today to be a teammate of Patrick Mahomes, to be a teammate of Jalen Hurts. Here's one of the things that I love about this documentary so much. They talked about the waiting, the years of being close, the years of being good, but not great, the years of winning, but not winning the big one, the Super Bowl losses, the criticism, the whispers. He's great, but he can't win the big one. He's one of the best quarterbacks, but he's a winner, but. And that's where sacrifice quietly enters into the story, because while the public debates legacy, the personal toll is adding up. It's 14 seasons of hits, 14 years of pressure, 14 years of being the reason, 14 years of being the blame, 14 years of off seasons, 14 years of injuries, 14 years of not being able to make practices with your kids, 14 years of not being able to be the father that you want to be, 14 years of not being the husband that you want to be. And during that time, we see his marriage just struggle. We're seeing his kids struggle. The documentary doesn't exploit details, but it doesn't hide it either, because success doesn't just demand time, it demands pressure. And it always takes that away from somewhere, usually home. I myself feel that pressure a lot. Here I am with a YouTube channel. Videos don't get posted by themselves. Videos don't get created by themselves. The research that goes into this content doesn't just come off the top of the dome. You got to do some research. You got to list some ideas out. That takes time. My son is 4. I've been married 7 years now, going on 8. This just doesn't happen without time being invested into my family. It takes time to create, but what are you willing to sacrifice? Not to mention I have a 9-to-5 job. So listen, while on paper I'm working 9 to 5, it may be some times where I'm working 12 to 5, because guess what? I got to do an interview. Oh, wait, I got to do a quick talking piece real quick. Oh, some breaking news just happened. What are my thoughts on it? What's my actual ideology behind this? What can I do creatively to articulate my point? It's a lot that goes into this, and a lot of people don't understand that sacrifice. Everybody's like, hey, podcast this, podcast that. I need a podcast. Yeah, you can get the podcast. That's the easy part. Getting the mic is easy. But what are you saying when you get on that mic? What are you doing when the podcast is over? You got to promote it. You got to come up with descriptions. You got to upload. You got to think about, hey, this episode is over, but what about next week? Can I bundle 2 or 3 episodes into one day? Sacrifice. But 1995 comes around. Mike Shanahan enters the picture. Quick backstory. Shanahan was once the offensive coordinator for Darren Reeves. John Elway, Mike Shanahan get close. Mike Shanahan tries to solve the rift between Dan Reeves and John Elway to no avail. Dan Reeves said, you got to go, Mike. You got to get up out of here. Mike Shanahan leaves. Dan Reeves is fired shortly after that. Boom. Mike Shanahan is back in Denver. And this is when the story shifts. Not because John Elway changed, but because the environment did. Structure made sense. And yes, part of that structure was reorganizing John Elway's load, shifting some things around on his plate. A running back, a couple of more talented receivers, a tight end. Terrell Davis enters the picture. A 6th-round pick running like the rent was due. Every single carry. Not to mention, Terrell Davis started out on special teams. That's what y'all don't know. Terrell Davis didn't waste steps. He didn't waste seasons. He did not waste opportunity. One of my favorite moments of this documentary is that John Elway said, people always ask him who is his favorite receiver. He says the open one. His favorite receiver is the one that is open. But his second favorite, Shannon Sharpe. Before the podcast, Before y'all knew him as Ump, before Club Shay Shay, before there's an interview with Cat Williams, he was a match nightmare back in the 90s. See, y'all think Shannon Sharpe is just, whatever he is today. But before Shannon Sharpe was on Club Shay Shay, the man was cooking. He, along with a couple of other tight ends, like your Tony Gonzalez, your Ben Coates, these are players who shifted what a tight end meant. A tight end no longer just meant you just an extra blocker. No, Shannon Sharpe could catch. He could run routes like a wide receiver. So that became a matchup nightmare because he's too fast for a linebacker to cover, but he's also too big for a strong safety to cover. He's too strong for a free safety to cover. He's too strong for a cornerback to cover. So what do you do with him? What do you do to stop a Shannon Sharpe? Not to mention you have Rod Smith added to the picture now, one of the best wide receivers. You have Ed McCaffrey. See, y'all don't know Ed McCaffrey. The name sounds familiar. It's Christian McCaffrey's father. Started out in Denver. Yes, Ed McCaffrey was out here cooking. Before there was a Julian Edelman, before there was a Wes Welker, before there was a Chris Hogan, it was Ed McCaffrey. Before a Puka Nacua, before a Cooper Kupp, yes, it was Ed McCaffrey out here, y'all. This team was loaded. They were not a joke. This team wasn't flashy. It was a line. But that 14th season, the story comes back around. Broncos versus Jaguars. A second year franchise knocks Denver out the playoffs. And this is where the documentary slowed down. Because this is where legends usually disappear. This is where people ask, why are you still doing this? You're not going to win the big one. This is when doubt creeps in. That moment is familiar to anyone chasing something bigger than comfort. 1997 comes around. It ain't no speeches no more. It ain't no more gimmicks. It's purpose. This one is for John. Green Bay is the favorite in the Super Bowl. Everybody knows that this is John Elway's moment. He's got to win this one. Brett Favre is the MVP. They strong running attack. Not to mention, on the other side of Green Bay Packers, you got Brett Favre over here as the QB. You got Reggie White on the other end, a defensive end, the minister of defense. If you know, you know. It did not look good for Denver, but they won. They won the Super Bowl. They hold up the Lombardi Trophy, and everyone's saying, this one's for John. Beautiful moment. But what made it even more beautiful, the person who talked about John Elway in the beginning of his career is now over. He has to hand John Elway the Lombardi Trophy, Terry Bradshaw. The same Terry Bradshaw who once questioned his commitment. And the life lesson right there, you don't argue with doubters. You outlast them. Then the part people forget to say loud enough, the Broncos go back to back. One of only 9 teams in NFL history have been able to do that. 9, just 9. That's not nostalgia. That's not conjecture. As rare air. Elway, Terrell Davis, Shannon Sharpe, Neil Smith, Steve Atwater. Yes, a team that understood timing. After back-to-back Super Bowls, John Elway can walk away. Now that he's home, there's no off seasons. There's no training. His marriage ends. So John Elway now has to find purpose. Not only does his marriage end, his twin sister passes away. His father passes away. John Elway is essentially down. He talks about dark moments that he had, not understanding what he could do. But he reached out to Pat Bowlen, Mr. B, as Shannon Sharpe calls him. John Elway becomes the general manager. Now he's not just... He goes from being one of the star players to now finding star players. One of his first moves, signs Peyton Manning. Another move, drafts Von Miller. And in this time, Super Bowl 50, they can never take this away. The Denver Broncos win the Super Bowl. He's the only person in league history to win the Super Bowl as a player and as a GM. John Elway did not stop sacrificing. He just carried it differently. After watching this documentary, I have an issue. Here's my issue. When the quarterback debates, the best quarterbacks of all time, you hear Tom Brady, perfect, I'm fine. Joe Montana, I'm fine. Pat Mahomes, I'm fine. And then it gets a little crazy. You hear Brett Favre, okay? Dan Marino, Aaron Rodgers. John Elway's name comes later down the list. And we got to put some respect on that man's name. And why does John Elway's name come up later? I believe it's because his public losses were screamed louder than his wins. For a man to win back-to-back Super Bowls, but at the same time he lost back-to-back Super Bowls, I get it. He endured it. Dan Marino gave us numbers. Brett Favre gave us chaos. Joe Montana gave us perfection. Tom Brady gave us incredible moments, Superman moments, if you will. No Cam Newton. That's also not shade. But the wait isn't easy. The wait that John Elway had, it wasn't easy. The hurt he had to deal with, it wasn't easy, but it lasted. John Wayne, he played men who didn't over-explain themselves. They stood tall until the dust settled. And that's why John Elway was the Duke of Denver. Not loud greatness, not trendy greatness, enduring greatness. The kind that costs something, the kind that takes time. So if you're building something and it feels like people don't see it yet, good, great. You might be on a John Elway timeline. And when it finally hits, when it finally blows up, when it finally gets you that deal that you've been looking for, when it gets you that recognition that you've been looking for, you won't have to say a word because the work will introduce you. Netflix, I gotta hand it to you. This was a great documentary. One that I didn't expect to be so good. Because of the man, I learned more about myself. Again, building more insight hasn't been glamorous. It's been a lot of late nights. It's been a lot of early mornings. It's been a lot of editing when I should have been resting. It's a lot of times where I should be working. But here I am posting content, trying to build a platform, believing before it ever paid me back. Sacrifice does not trend. The cost to greatness isn't trending. The cost to greatness is a lot. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? John Elway asked himself the same thing. Is this worth it? He stayed because winning was worth it. Would he sacrifice his marriage all over again? I don't think so. Would he sacrifice not being in his kid's life again? I don't think so. But it's what happened. And one thing that the documentary ends on is that now he can be present as a grandfather. His children have forgiven him for the time that he's missed out on because he can now be present as a grandfather. Netflix, y'all did your big one on this one. Y'all did your big one. I enjoyed this documentary. I hope there are more lining up for players like John Elway. John Elway didn't win because the road got easy. He won because he stayed when leaving would have made sense. And that's the life lesson. Some timelines aren't built for early praise. Some paths don't peak fast, but if you stay solid long enough, the work will catch up. That's a John Elway timeline. And if you're building something right now that feels unseen, underappreciated, or unfinished, you're probably closer than you think. Now, if this story hit you, if you rock with it, if you rock with this kind of sports storytelling, this kind of culture, this kind of life perspective, make sure you like this video. Subscribe to the channel, and if you really want to support what we're building here, consider becoming a channel member. That's how you will help more insight, keep telling the stories that matter, the ones that don't always trend, but always last. This is more insight you can trust because there is more where it came from.